Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn, the topic of which is Minnesota State Boards and Commissions. We're really happy that you're joining us today. Let's go to our next slide, please. Before we get started with today's talk, just a mention about accessibility options to everyone. Live captioning is available for today's discussion. If you are interested in that, move your mouse around the screen and you will see a CC closed caption button at the bottom of your screen that you can click on in order to have that feature available to you. We also have an ASL interpreter available for today's discussion. If you would like the interpreter to be visible to you throughout the discussion, you can pin the interpreter to your screen by hovering over their picture. ASL interpreter Sam is what's shown on her picture. And then click the ellipses in the upper right-hand corner and select Pin. And this way you should be able to see our interpreter for today's discussion. Also, just to mention that today's meeting is being recorded. By making a public comment, you agree to have your name, image, and voice recorded and shared with the public today. Next slide, please. Our event rules for today are: please raise your hand and wait to be called on by the facilitator to share. We will have a Q&A time after both of our presenters have talked today, so wait until that Q&A time to raise your hand where I will mention it again. When you are asking questions, please identify yourself, and if you'd like, you can share your preferred pronouns. Please share about the topic of this event only, including when using the chat feature. Be respectful of other participants. All participants are equal and have a right to ask questions and to share ideas. Please stay on mute and off camera except when called on to share. Please do not share personal contact information. We want to respect people's privacy. Anyone attempting to share personal information will be muted. So today's discussion is on boards and commissions membership. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Jack Congello. Jack is short for Jacqueline. She is the Associate Director of Boards and Commissions for Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. She works with a team that is responsible for helping the governor conduct outreach, recruit potential applicants, and manage the appointments process to fill hundreds of seats on the state's boards and commissions each year. So I'm happy to turn over to Jacqueline, to Jack, and give her time to speak. So welcome, Jack. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. As Leah mentioned, my name is Jack Congello. I'm the Associate Director of Boards and Commissions. And today I'm also joined by one of my colleagues, Madeline Nelson. Madeline is the Director of Boards and Commissions. And Madeline, do you want to give a brief intro before I jump into the slides?
Hi, Jack. Thank you. And I'll keep it very brief because I, like everyone else, I'm sure, am excited to hear what you have to say. I am the Director of Boards and Commissions. I work closely with Jack on helping the governor and lieutenant governor make several hundred appointments annually. We're always looking for applicants, recommendations, feedback, etc. And we are just so excited to be able to join you all today. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Madeline. So for today, I will see here if I can share my screen here. There we are. So today I would like to share a little information about boards and commissions, what are boards, how you can find interest areas, and how to apply for boards. So to start things off, overall, as Madeline mentioned, we have hundreds of boards, and that means hundreds of vacancies every year. All these vacancies means that there are hundreds of opportunities, and there are opportunities on a variety of different roles and different topics in the state. When it comes to the types of roles, some of our boards have a more advisory role. Some of them have regulatory purposes and licensing purposes, but all of them serve vital functions for the state. And our office likes to say that we have a variety of topics from A to Z. So literally architecture to the zoo. And there are a lot of different topics for people to be interested in. So I wanted to share a little example today of what it would look like to find a board and to apply if you know interest areas. So I will share a live website, and this is the Secretary of State's website. If you are curious of checking it out, I always welcome you to take a look at Secretary of State's website and then select the boards and commissions section. You'll find all of the boards listed, and I just happened to pull up one of our boards that has a few vacancies currently posted. So this example is the Minnesota Commission on National and Community Service. Some folks may know it better as Serve Minnesota. And on the Secretary of State's website, there is a lot of helpful information. So if you are interested in knowing more about the board, or maybe you want to know more about what vacancies there are or what opportunities there are, the website has that information available for the public. There is some information on the upper left-hand corner that would give information of enabling statutes. So if you're interested in what the law says is a requirement for the board or for the seats on the board, you can find that information on the top left. Additionally, if you are interested in knowing more about a board's day-to-day functions, or maybe current practices or projects that they're working through, the board staff are very helpful and very knowledgeable. They have contact information available on the Secretary of State's website. And in this instance, we have a contact person for Minnesota, or Serve Minnesota, and the chair listed. And there is also a section called details. And when selected, you can pull up a lot of helpful information about what membership requirements there are, what are some of the powers and duties of the board. And sometimes boards also include information on how many meetings they have and how long those meetings are. Additionally, you will find a section if there are current vacancies that lists all of the currently available seats. Some of these seats have specific requirements. So if you have questions on what requirements there are, who qualifies for a seat, you are welcome to reach out to the board and our office. There is a section on the current applications that I just want to draw your attention to really quick. You may notice that there is a line here that says first application review date. And our office oftentimes gets questions about what does it mean for a seat where the review date is in the past. And so this is a perfect example. You can see here that the review date for these seats is marked as November 2021. And since we are in March 2022, some folks might think, does this mean that the seat is closed or application periods are closed? And the answer is no. This application review date is a statutory minimum for our team. But as long as the seat is posted on the Secretary of State's website, folks are still welcome to send in applications. I will note that if you know folks who are interested in applying, applications are public on the Secretary of State's website. So I just wanted to call that out. And additionally, the current board members are also available to be seen on the website as well. So if you're interested in knowing more of the board composition, that information is available. So I wod say that the Secretary of State's website is one of the most helpful tools. It has a lot of information. Um, and one thing that I noted was that there are different seats. There are different requirements for seats. And generally, there are 4 main buckets. You'll typically see a lot of vacancies have requirements for professional settings or professional requirements. For example, you may see some requirements for boards say that folks have to be practicing in a specific profession or hold a certain licensure for a certain number of years. Those are generally found on our licensing and regulatory boards. But additionally, you'll find seats that are often called public member seats. And these may, again, appear on the regulatory and licensing boards. And public member seats require that a person not be a part of that profession. For example, if it was the nursing board, they just couldn't be a nurse. Additionally, it does require folks not be maritally or financially tied to that profession as well. But we are looking for a consumer perspective or a client perspective, so that public member seat really brings kind of the additional perspective to the table. A couple other buckets of seats that are generally found with requirements. There are sometimes what we call the geographic seats. Sometimes the enabling statutes will have sections that say we need a certain number of folks from each congressional district. Or sometimes it will say there's a balance between greater Minnesota and the metro. So it has a little more restrictions on where you have to be within Minnesota. And the last bucket that I would say we have is a demographic requirement. And generally, these seats may have requirements on different gender demographics, racial or ethnic demographics, disability demographics, but they really vary by board. So anytime you are looking at a board and you're interested in knowing the requirements for the seat, I would say the state law or the statutes have a lot of helpful information. But again, if some of it is confusing or you need a little more help kind of figuring out what the requirements are, please don't hesitate to reach out. So each year we have a timeline that we generally work through. And some of this touches a little bit on that review date that I pointed out earlier, that initial review date. So every year, and the first Monday in November, our annually expected vacancies will be posted on the Secretary of State's website. So there will be a flood of opportunities posted. It just so happens that this past year, it was on November 1st. And by statute, our office has 21 days of a minimum application period. So within those 21 days, we are generally really pushing on outreach. We are connecting with different applicants. But that is the date that you saw up on the Secretary of State's website. Now, after that deadline, it does not close the application period, and we still accept applications that are sent in after that review date. But it just means that our team could keep moving forward through the appointments process if we chose to. So if you know anyone who is interested in applying, we always encourage folks to apply earlier rather than later. And that way we can make sure that application materials are in before our team moves ahead with our process. In January, those seats will typically expire, usually around the first Monday of the new year. And so these are the seats that are the annual turnover seats that we expect to happen. And then between January and June, there are many seats that expire in June. And so that is our big time frame where we are working with all the different seats. We are working on outreach and pushing through the applications process. So again, appointments could happen anytime in this time frame. And if you know folks who are interested in vacancies, we would encourage them to apply earlier in that timeline. During this time frame, as I mentioned, that we do a lot of different outreach. We try to focus our outreach in a cohesive and collective topic area. And a lot of times our topic areas are around the governor's and lieutenant governor's goals. So currently, one of the administration's goals is really providing family supporting or providing the accessibility for a family sustaining income, and really looking at how the workforce and licensing boards have a role in helping that goal of the administrations. So this month, we are really pushing on many of our licensure and regulatory boards. These could be, for example, the Board of Medical Practice, the Nursing Board, Board of Physical Therapy, Board of Accountancy, and many, many other examples. But a lot of the boards that we are currently pushing through outreach have to do with more of the regulated and licensed professions. As noted earlier, there are some seats that may have professional requirements, but again, we're always looking for folks to serve as public members as well. So if you know folks who are interested but are not part of the profession and they're not maritally or financially tied to the profession, they are also welcome to apply. In terms of the actual appointments process, and this is kind of a broad overview, but we have these different stages, and we already kind of touched on the application stage. At any time, folks are welcome to apply on the Secretary of State's website. And we also have a review period. So after folks apply on the Secretary of State's website, and anytime after that 21-day minimum application review period, we could move forward to a review stage. And typically what happens is we will look at a wide variety of factors. We could be reaching out to different community stakeholders, talking about what the community thinks and how they're impacted by the board. We do some internal review as well. And we're looking at what is the requirements for the seats and how this board or this person would impact the board in its workings. Additionally, I'll note that we have a standard background check process. So if folks were to move forward through the process and be named a finalist, they would receive a couple forms from our office. So just noting that there would be a Department of Public Safety and Department of Revenue release and a background questionnaire. I will note that through the background check process, there is absolutely nothing that is automatically disqualifying. So I know sometimes folks are a little hesitant around background check processes, but if anything were to come up through this process, what would happen is our office would reach out and just have a conversation to maybe ask some clarifying questions and connect with the applicant. But again, it is not automatically disqualifying, and we are happy to connect with applicants if there are questions or concerns around this process. And then towards the end of the process, what we do is we take all the information that we've gathered, all of the feedback, the recommendations, and we put everything together for the governor, and he reviews all the information. And in the end, it's his decision who he appoints to the board. So we usually wait to hear from the governor, and we'll work with the board and the applicants. And as soon as we hear his decision, we will be in contact with all applicants. And then there is a fun press release stage. So overall, this is, I know, a lot of information on boards and commissions. There are a lot of different opportunities. And Madeline and I are very passionate about connecting with folks, sharing all this information. But at the end of the day, we are looking for your help and your voice in finding Minnesotan leaders who are from a variety of different communities, who represent a variety of different interests and are willing to share their knowledge, their perspectives, their life experiences, and their skills with these Minnesota boards. Now, there may be some of you out there today who are interested in serving on a board, and I highly encourage you to go to the Secretary of State's website. There are many opportunities where you yourself can apply. But additionally, I know that many of you are out in a variety of communities and different networks. And this is all information that you are welcome to share with your networks. Encourage your friends, your family, different leaders that you work with, and encourage them to apply as well. Additionally, I know if there are sometimes folks who maybe themselves don't want to apply, but they know others who are applying, we do take feedback and recommendations as part of our process. So if you hear that one of your friends or family is applying, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to accept feedback or recommendations. So overall, I know this is a lot of information, but Madeline and I are more than happy to answer questions later after Narita's next presentation.
Jack, thank you so much. That was some great information. We appreciate you being here today and sharing that with everyone. So thank you. Our next speaker is going to talk to us about personal experience serving on boards. We have Dr. Narita Hughes with us today, who is the Dean for the School of Business, Careers, Education, and Workforce Innovation at North Hennepin Community College, and the President and Chief Executive Officer of JG Consulting, LLC. She has a variety of experiences ranging from public and private sector to higher education, displaying exceptional leadership, organizational development, time management skills, enhanced knowledge of implementing and identifying training needs, and succession planning. She is currently the board chair of the Council of Minnesotans of African Heritage and serves on the board of directors for the Hennepin Carver Workforce Innovation Board and the Governor's Workforce Development Board, to name a few. Thank you so much for being with us today to share your board experience. Welcome.
Thank you. So I do not have a PowerPoint because I felt it would probably just make sense just for you all to hear my direct experience working with the council. I thought I would kind of start off, if folks are not familiar with the Council of Minnesotans for African Heritage, just to kind of give you a quick background. In 2015, legislatively, the name was changed to the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage. It used to be called Council for Black Minnesotans. And so 2015, that language legislatively was changed. It is a 15-member board, 11 are community members, and then 4 are actually elected legislators that also serve on the board. Our mission really is to make sure that those of African heritage really can participate and equitably benefit from anywhere from political, social, economic, resources. We're a direct liaison and advisee to the governor and legislator on issues that are specific to African heritage, which is one of the reasons why, I had opted to throw my name in the hat, if you will. As Jack had just said, hey, if you are passionate about something, you want to elevate some of the work that you may be doing locally and really elevate it to a statewide level, I would highly recommend applying for any of these boards. This particular board that I have served on, we have done some phenomenal things in reference to how do we change the landscape, if you will, in Minnesota. One of the things that we were very much so instrumental in, with us being currently in a legislative session, is we were able to be advocates for and was able to pass the Crown Act. We're still waiting for this to still be heard in the Senate, but the Crown Act has been passed. And if you're not familiar with the Crown Act, it really is to eliminate hair discrimination. And so it's really adding value of natural hairstyles, specifically for those of African heritage, but to eliminate that where there could be potential racial prejudice or discrimination that may happen. And so it will bring clarity to the Human Rights Act to ensure that no Minnesotan, I should say, would actually be discriminated against because of their natural hair. So we are very proud of being able to advocate for that, being able to testify, for such a bill that was put forth. The other piece that I know, and this is all under my leadership, by the way, too, the other thing that was very instrumental is when the murder of George Floyd happened, we were very instrumental in making sure that it got moved to our Attorney General's office and out of the hands of Mike Freeman for Hennepin County. Some may say, well, is that really something to be excited about? And actually it is, because we saw what the outcome was, from a national landscape, if you will. But because, I bring up these two specific, conditions, and I was going to say issues, but it's not an issue, but these two conditions, because these are just some of the things to be made aware of what the council, what we're expected to do, so to speak. I had to laugh when Jack gave her presentation, because yes, I had to go through all of that of what she said, the background check, the Department of Revenue, the background of public safety. And it's funny because when you make it to that round, you kind of sit back and you say to yourself, okay, have I paid all my taxes? Do I have any, outstanding tickets or warrants or anything that's going to disqualify me? So it may feel like it's a tedious process, but it actually goes rather quickly. But I have enjoyed my time of being able to serve, on this particular board, and I do serve on another governor appointed board. But one of the reasons why, and like I mentioned at the beginning, is because the work that I was doing locally, I would always get asked the question, how can we bring this and elevate it higher? What is it that we can do different to see what I would call radical imagination? So how do we make changes that can be applicable, for our Black and Brown constituents, when we know, I don't need to regurgitate what the inequities are, but how can we make sure that we are, advocating the way that we need to be advocating, but also, bringing about a change. And I'm one that, I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm actually going to, kind of jump in with both feet. Some people may just, say, here's what we need to do, and not really do anything. For me, it was, yes, I'm saying we need to do something, and then I'm actually taking action and being able to, be a part of such a great council, but then also making sure that we are bringing things to the forefront, having the conversations with the governor's office, so that we can make the changes that need to be made, so that the inequities, are made equitable and fair, and that we're bringing about, certain things that are important to us where there could be inequities, and we know that there are inequities that exist from a statewide level, from economic development to education. And so one of the things that we have been able to do that has never been done is we decided to reach out to our local state agencies. And we've had either the commissioners or we've had the directors, we've had Madeline come and kind of share the same, piece that Jack just shared with constituents that may join when we do meet, which we do meet on the second Tuesday. It is an open meeting, so I'm just going to throw that out there. If anybody ever wants to hear what we're meeting about and what we actually talk about, it is the second Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Right now, because of the pandemic, we are meeting virtually, and that is one of the topics that is on our agenda item. The executive team meets actually next Tuesday. So the first Tuesday is the executive team, the second Tuesday is the full council. And that's one of the questions that we're going to bring about. Do we want to move towards in-person, being that we're opening up a little bit more? But we have been able to invite several of our commissioners from the various state agencies to talk about what they're doing within their agencies, but then more importantly, how does it impact those of us that are of African heritage? And the beauty about having commissioners come and having directors come and having our public people hear what's going on, it allows them to say, where can I dig in? So maybe I don't want to join a board, but maybe I want to possibly be a part of some of these committees or table topic or table talks, so to speak. And so we have had, anywhere from the Commissioner of Department of Corrections to both commissioners of education. So Commissioner for Minnesota Department of Education, and then we've had Commissioner Olson come, so the Commissioner of Office of Higher Ed. We've even had our Commissioner of Department of Natural Resources. We've had the Commissioner for Revenue. I mean, so you kind of name it and we've had them. And part of that is because there are several things that are going on from a statewide level that doesn't always make it down to the local level. So for me, it was, I strongly believe in how do we, put out information. And so making sure that information is, sent out to the public and that public knows how can I sign up for this or how can I sign up for that or where do I lean in here or where do I lean in, there. And so those were some of the core reasons why I have opted to, join such a council and join, this particular board. But I will say, although I'm making it sound like it's just easy peasy and that it's great, I'll be honest, you also are in the limelight. And specifically as the council chair, there are times where, our names have not been stated in the positive. And so that's another thing to be cognizant of is, if you're one that says, hey, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, or I don't know if I want to join this board because, I'm hearing some negativity, it kind of comes with the territory. There are certain issues that are brought to us and we have to make a decision. I mean, we are nonpartisan, so we can't, sway one side and we can't sway the other side, but we really have to be cognizant of how we approach things that are brought to us from the public. The other piece is, do we buy in and do we support everything that's brought to us? Not necessarily, especially if we know it's going to cause adversity or controversy. And so you really have to look at those things when you're looking at potentially joining a board. And I would say do your research. I've had people that have asked me about what is it like serving on a board. Certain times it can be time consuming. When we were in between hiring our executive director, that was time consuming because I felt like majority of my time was spent doing council stuff versus, my actual job. And so it's balancing, that aspect of it as well. But from a volunteerism, perspective, you're able to get into the community, you're able to go into, different cities that you probably may not have gone into. And I think that was exciting, where we've made trips to Rochester. We have people that serve on our board that are from Duluth. And so we're not just hearing from a metropolitan, area, but we're really hearing, the issues that impact African heritage across the state. And then we're trying to approach those through a strategic lens to make sure that we are absolutely and positively trying to make those changes that need to be changed. And then when we're asked to either sign our name onto a bill or we're asked to testify, we really look at it through a holistic lens. And so if you are one that, specifically for this particular board, where you have never really gotten into public policy, this may be something to think about, looking at some of these boards where you may potentially be, into public policy. That may be something for you to kind of, dabble in for a little bit, understanding, how is a bill made? If we are bringing something forward and we want it to go into legislation, then what is it that we need to be able to do? So those are some of the things that I've been involved in, having the conversations with various constituents, whether it's legislative, officials or just the general public. And, looking at the community-based organizations that may approach you and want to sit down with you to say, hey, we need you to support this, and here's why we want you to support that. But then being able to have those tough conversations and say, you know what, I like what you're trying to do, but we may not be able to support it. And so just those are some of the things that to be prepared for. And again, you have to remember, I'm giving you the lens through a chair. So even just as a regular council member, you may not necessarily, have, may not be in it nitty gritty. I guess I'll say that, so those are some things just to kind of think about as well. I will pause there. And I know if there are questions, I know we're going to have a Q&A. I'm happy, when we get to that part to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. Again, wonderful information for the group here today. I am going to now open it up for question and answer. So if you are on the call and would like to ask a question of one of our two speakers, please signal that by using the raise your hand feature with the buttons at the bottom. And when I call on you then, please let us know which of the speakers your question is for. I'll start with, oh, and if you could, when you are asking a question, could you just introduce yourself to the group using your first name, please? I'll call on Deborah Gleason.
Hi, I'm Deborah Gleason, as you just said, also known as the Information Tamer. That's who the little avatar is, if anyone can see her. My question, I think, is probably directed mostly toward Jack, although both presentations were excellent, by the way. Is there a limitation to the number of councils/boards you are allowed to serve on at any period in time? I'm currently on one, but I'm interested in trying to find another one.
Yes, thank you for the question, Deb. I would say there really isn't a limitation on how many boards one can serve on. In fact, we do have folks who do serve on multiple boards at the same time. I will just note that a lot of these boards are highly competitive processes. So it really comes down to what each board's needs are, what their focus areas are, and the applicant pool. But folks are welcome to apply to more than one board.
Dr. Hughes, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, like I just said, I sit on this council, so this board that I was appointed to, and then Deb, just to answer your question too, I also sit on the Governor's Workforce Development Board. And I would just say, if you do want to serve on multiple boards, I always pay attention to when they're meeting so that you're not overbooking yourself. And so that's just something to be cognizant of as well. And luckily for me, one meets during the day and one actually meets in the evening. So there's no conflict.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. I'm going to move on and call on Renee to speak next.
So I got the impression there are multiple potential committees to be on across the state. What happens if you are in kind of transition? You might be moving from one place to another. Does that impact it? I mean, obviously, if you move outside of Minnesota, that would impact it. And how long do you typically stay on these?
Who would like to take that? Jack?
Yep, I'm happy to jump in. So unfortunately, part of the answer is it depends on board. But generally speaking, a lot of our boards have 4-year terms. There are some that have maybe 3 years or 6 years. Really depends on each board. But if you have a specific one in mind that you are interested in knowing more about, a board staff can help. Our office can help answer that more specifically. And in terms of moving around, I noted earlier that there are some seats that are geographic requirement seats. And if there are seats on boards that say maybe specific congressional districts or specific zones, it depends on what the board language says. But again, if this is something that you're interested in knowing more about and there's a specific board that you're looking into, please always feel free to reach out, and we're happy to navigate specific board instances with you.
Thanks, Jack. Any comments from you, Dr. Hughes?
No, Jack pretty much answered it because, like she said, each board is going to be a little bit different. And we're kind of set up the same way. And with the legislative change that I even identified from 2015 to changes to African heritage. So we have 2 specific ethnic groups that we look for representation, and that's East African and West African. We make sure that we have that representation on our board with the legislative change so it's not all African American, but representative of African descent.
So
Excellent.
Dr. Hughes, you also mentioned that you were trying to meet in person. How often do the boards meet in person? Because, you know, my little tag says I'm up in East Grand Forks, which is a long way away from Minneapolis.
And you know, we haven't. So to be honest, we haven't met in person since 2019. And so one of the things that we thought, well, I think everybody thought that last year we were going to be able to potentially meet in person. But after, you know, we kind of had that surge again, we voted and said, let's just go ahead and complete the remainder of the year. And so what we had discussed in January, this January 2022, when we met, we said, let's revisit it for after first quarter. And so because, you know, first quarter will be, you know, will be ending, you know, tomorrow because it's the 30th, then we actually will meet. That's on the agenda item for next Tuesday, is to say, okay, now that we know we're potentially going to be, you know, lifting a little bit more, do we want to move to in person? Or I'm really going to be opting more for a hybrid model. And the reason why is because I recognize that I have, you know, folks that sit on my board that are not in the metropolitan area. So like I had mentioned before, we do have somebody that's representative from Duluth. And so we are trying to move, hopefully we'll be able to move to a hybrid model. The challenge that I will tell you is just making sure that technology wise that we're able to do that based off of where the council actually, their offices are located.
Do you have openings on your board?
I believe we do, and I should know this, shame on me.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I believe we do have openings on our board, you know, and Jack had said it too. I would definitely, you know, recommend going to Secretary of State's, you know, website and just kind of perusing through, you know, where boards are open. But what I love about the boards, and I know, you know, I know where Neil was trying to go with this, but it wasn't appropriate for this particular setting. But just about every board does have public comment. We have it on our board. And so if there's specific things that people want to bring forward to us, or people, you know, want to come on and what I'll say, for lack of better words, want to vent, you know, there is a spot, you know, public comment where we allow it, but we do limit them. You know, we do limit the comments to, you know, anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes, not to exceed. And we also ask if people want to have a public comment, you know, that they can sign up, but a lot of times people don't see that. So we don't necessarily discount them not speaking just because they didn't sign up, but we just highly recommend, because if it is a community-based organization, and right now we've had a lot of that because of the legislative session, then we're like, okay, we need to allocate a little bit more time. So that's really why we ask for people to sign up for public comment, because then we want to make sure that we don't have to cut people off if it's of utter importance that we need to hear about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We did have another participant who had their hand raised, Bea. I see that your hand is no longer up, so you may not have a question anymore, but if you do.
I think
free.
Dr. Hughes actually answered it. It was about whether boards are planning to go back to meeting in person or not. And, you know, the answer was probably they'll be doing a hybrid model, which is what I wanted to know. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Yes, that question's on a lot of our minds these days, not only in terms of board meetings, but also just the general work environment, which has really changed over the past 2 years. So that's very relevant. Thank you for that, everyone. Any other questions for our guest speakers today? Or until I have a question, would either one of you like to talk about just inviting people with disabilities to participate on boards and things that might be being done to welcome and support that participation?
I can kick us off, and then Jack, if you have some other pieces. So I would highly recommend, you know, folks that, you know, have what I would call an inability, you know, to join, you know, a board, or even just join and hear what we have to say. You know, just to understand the dynamics of the board, understand what the purpose of the board is, just to see, is there an area where you feel like you can dig in and lean in towards. Going back to something I mentioned earlier, we did have, you know, someone come in and talk from the inabilities perspective. And we even said then, how do we partner? Because there's a lot of times where folks that have, an inability don't necessarily think to join a board. And so that was one of the things that when we had some of the commissioners come in and talk about that, we welcome that, and I think that's why we're really trying to make sure that as we, open up a little bit more, that we make it flexible as far as how we meet, because where our, and I'll be honest, where we are located, it's not easily navigatable. We're in the Centennial, building, but, a lot of steps, a lot of, when you get right into the building, unless you enter in from the parking lot, but if you enter in from the street, there isn't, and it wasn't obvious to me until somebody said something, and we meet in the lower level. So if you're entering in straight from the street, there isn't accessibility for you to get down. You would literally have to have someone take you all the way back through, the parking ramp, and then somebody would have to let you in because we meet after business hours. So we are very cognizant of that, and I would highly encourage it.
And from the appointments process perspective, I know our team, we do have alternate forms available. So if there are any challenges with the applications process, or if there are concerns, please feel free to contact our office. We are happy to work with you to help complete the process. And if there are alternate formats that are needed, we can work with you through that. We do know that a lot of the boards are very cognizant, and we're also really just trying to make purposeful outreach as well, knowing that there are community leaders across Minnesota and encouraging folks to apply, that we do need these perspectives and your voices at the table. So we are always encouraging folks to apply and to share the news with their friends and family to also apply. Again, our team is happy to help if there are questions to the process.
Excellent. Thank you both for that. We'll take one more question.
Leah, there is a question in the chat,
Okay.
and it is, are there age restrictions to these committees?
Thank you, Diane. Do either one of you want to take that? Age restrictions on committees?
So I can jump in and say that there are, in a lot of the statutes, there aren't strict age requirements, but there are some requirements around, for instance, how many years of practice you might have to have for a seat, or how many years of experience. So it's not solely around age per se. It's sometimes more around the experience levels. I know there are some boards that are impacted by statute that requires us to have at least one member of older populations represented to make sure that there are different voices at the table. But in terms of a strict number on an age requirement, there generally isn't one.
I was particularly thinking of youth, like under 18.
Right.
And youth are also welcome to apply as well. We do have some seats that are specifically for youth, but they're also welcome to apply to any of the boards.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll try and take your question. Nelson, do you want to introduce yourself and speak to the group?
I do, and I'll keep it real brief because it's not a question. I just wanted to echo Jack's comment, but also not interrupt the flow of the meeting too much about the importance of having leaders from across the state. From governor's office perspective, one Minnesota means one Minnesota, right? And that means that we want voices from leaders within the disability community, not only on the numerous boards and commissions, Council on Disability, State Rehabilitation Council for the Blind, and others that specifically focus on the needs and priorities of that community, but also on any number of the other boards, accountancy, architecture, health licensing boards, advisory groups on mental health, on the environment, on clean water, soil and water regulation. I won't list them all because we don't have enough time, but there's a lot. And we want everybody's perspective. Parks and trails, right, as an example of one. And to say that, it's these are opportunities, to do the important work that Dr. Hughes described, to obviously, to do the work of each individual board and commission, and using licensing boards as an example, when taken broadly, right? When you have members on these boards that bring an equity lens to conversations around licensing requirements, continuing education requirements, what are the barriers to entry of these professions? When you're having lots of little conversations, across the variety of these boards, can be a catalyst for really meaningful and hopefully intersectional equity focused conversations in sort of a public policy space. So in brief, that's why I know Jack and myself, and I'm sure Dr. Hughes, are so grateful to be able to join this call today, and really excited about working with folks in the future.
Thank you so much for bringing that point up. And it's just left to me to say thank you to our speakers, Jack Congello and Dr. Narita Hughes, and Madeline as well. Thank you all for being here today, for sharing such valuable information. And then to remind participants to please go to the Olmsted website. They do have a web page on boards and commissions with links that you can view, which I think you'll see an image of right now. And then you can also register to receive their newsletters for other lunch and learn conversations and other public and community events. So please do go to the Olmsted website. You can see it up there on the screen and sign up. Thank you again to all our speakers, to our ASL interpreter, and to everyone who was on the call today. Also, thank you to all of the Olmsted staff who are helping make this a success behind the scenes. Thanks, everybody. Stay warm and don't slip out there, and enjoy the rest of your day.